Happy December. For those of you who I've not met, I'm Maggie. I'm the Community Product Manager for DataHub. And we have a jam-packed agenda for you today. We're going to do just a super quick update on our Q4 roadmap and progress there. Shirshanka is going to go through our project updates, so some of the new features functionality you can be looking for in the next release. Then I'm going to come back and give a review of the wonderful things that we built as a community for this year. And then we're going back to DataHub 101 kind of basics. So we'll be talking about users and authentication. John's going to be showing us UI-based ingestion, which is just going to be silly cool. And then we have some folks from Grofers to talk us through some of their use cases and how they're using DataHub. And then stick around for the end. We'll have a nice little surprise for you before we send you off to the new year. So community updates. As of this morning, we have 1,944 folks. I'm very confident that we'll hit 2,000 by the end of the year. So that's a very exciting milestone. Reminder that we have office hours on Tuesdays. Also a couple of collaboration channels. So if you're looking for ways to contribute, or if you want to show off something that you've done, please head over to our contributor show and tell channels. And then we're also rolling out, this is based off of some community feedback that folks are looking for some channels to kind of just have like best practices conversations, or maybe share advice or kind of learnings there. So I've created 2 new channels, one for advice for data governance, and then one for advice for metadata modeling, and we'll see how it goes. So feel free to hop in there, also post and announce that those are open and ready for you. Also very exciting news, Shirshanka and I are going to be speaking at Data Council in Austin in January. We're going to be giving a guide to data discovery for data practitioners. So if you're going to Data Council, or if you're in the Austin area, please let me know. I'd love to safely COVID-wise meet up and hear about what you're doing with DataHub. For those of you who were at our October town hall, this is the roadmap that we shared for the quarter. I'm not going to get in. I just wanted to show you this as a reminder. This will be really great context for what Shirshanka is about to walk through. But one thing I did want to call out that's super exciting. We've had a lot of really great contributions and conversations happening in the Tableau channel. And so we're kind of rallying the community around that and hoping to have a first pass of a Tableau integration within the next maybe 2-3 weeks or so. So super exciting there. We're also seeing some momentum on ClickHouse. So again, kind of call for community support on those ones. If you are interested in helping with design or implementation, please feel free to reach out to me. And now Shirshanka will pass it over to you.
Cool. So this is the most favorite part of the presentation for me, because I get to talk about all the amazing stuff that has happened in the last month. We had 2 releases, 08, 18 and 19. 19 was really a small bug fix release. And, as usual, there's a bunch of this log4j stuff going on. So there might be actually another one next week. We are setting up for a bi-weekly release cadence for the server. And as you know, the PyPy client typically goes on a 4 version number cadence. So we align the client release with the server release with a .0, and then the client, as ingestion bug fixes or small things come in, we release the client ahead of the server. So 08, 18 and 19 are both out. As usual, commit rate looks amazing, 100 plus, actually way above 100 plus. And also a really healthy diversity of committers from multiple companies, as well as overall size. Super excited. This was a big month for ingestion connectors. So, NiFi, Mode, Metabase, these were all big things that the community had asked for many months now. And I'm so glad that we are able to release it. So please try it out and let us know how it goes. Lots of new contributors as well. So welcome to the community. There's also been small improvements to dbt, Snowflake, and BigQuery, and a few others. Big improvements to Redshift lineage. So thanks, Tamash, for that feature. It just comes out of the box right now. All you need to do is just include table lineage, and you get your Redshift lineage metadata. So this is dataset to dataset within Redshift, as well as S3 to Redshift for the load loads that are happening into Redshift. Another big update as part of that release was metadata service auth, another common request. So now John demoed it last time. You can go into the UI, provision a personal access token for yourself, and then use that to make API calls. And GMS, the metadata service, now supports token-based authentication as well. And then finally, that amazing demo from last time, which kind of finally worked, is live. We have no-code UI with aspects, so you can extend your aspects, extend your metadata model with aspects, give them nice little annotations, and then see them in the UI without writing a single line of code. Super excited. I think Sarah from the community has already tried it out, so I'm really excited to see what all you'll do with it. And we're continuing to move the no-code movement forward. Next year, we'll be rolling out support for entities and other kinds of display elements as well. Back to the actual people who are making all this happen. So lots of code contributions from Frederick, Enrico, Thomas Larson. I missed you, but that vulnerability fix is super important. Tamash, Mayuri, Sergio, Eric, Luis, and Hyun, who's been giving us really good PRs on improving the BigQuery audit log support. And of course, the community has been, kicking, the proverbial behind really well. Excel, Asim, Ajay, Zach, Seraph, Dan, Pramod, Martin, Chris, and Ed. Really great conversations. And thanks to Maggie for facilitating everything. But it's the community that makes it what it is. So thanks a lot, and let's keep the conversations going. I'll dive right into some things that I'm super excited about on the next slide. The first is Spark Lineage. Again, another very important feature. It's a push-based integration, the kind of integrations we really love. It's been a long time coming. Essentially, you get the jar, drop it into your Spark application, and the Spark application is going to emit lineage metadata every time it runs. So this includes kind of the pipeline def, the job within it, and then data sets in and out from the job. Try it out. It's our first release. It also flushed out some of the intricacies in publishing jars and things like that. So you'll start to see more jars showing up that you can actually depend on, like the metadata model itself and the Java emitter library and things like that. Few caveats: support for Spark 3.x is coming. And we haven't tested this on Databricks yet, but I know people in the community are already trying it out. So hopefully we'll get that working. Spark jobs, any kind of Spark submit, notebooks, all of that works. It sends the metadata change event over HTTP to the DataHub server, and we'll release a support for emitting over Kafka as well. So that's the Spark Lineage update. Try it out. Docs are here. This is now available. You don't have to wait for anything. Next up is another highly requested feature, stale metadata deletion. So as you know, when you run ingestion, it connects up to the source, finds all the tables, finds all the schemas, connects it up back into DataHub. And the next time when you run it again, it essentially does the same thing. And the problem with that is maybe a few tables got dropped and the ingestion system does not know about it. So that table that you ingested the last time continues living on forever. In some cases, that is a good thing, but in most cases, people are like, why is this table still here? I want it gone. So enter stateful ingestion. We actually did a demo of it a couple of months ago. It's finally in the product and in the ingestion system. And on top of that, we've implemented stale metadata deletion. This is an opt-in feature. Go try it out. All SQL sources are supported, and Snowflake usage is also supported. What that means is Snowflake usage will remember what dates it scanned the last time and make incremental progress every time you run it. So you don't have to fiddle around with the start and end dates. You don't have to give it any config at all. It's going to run store state actually on DataHub. We like reusing DataHub for all metadata storage if you haven't figured that out by now. So we store state about all the tables that were ingested in DataHub as a time series aspect. Then the next time the source runs, it compares the previous state, looks at the new state that it got, does a diff, figures out which data sets are no longer present, and issues soft deletes for them. Soft deletes because you might have documentation and other things that people have written about these tables. And so if those tables are rediscovered in the future, you don't lose any of that metadata, that important metadata. It will be available in 08.19.2. I haven't cut the release yet. So this is the pip package. And the server needs to be 08.20 and above. The client actually checks for it, so you don't have to worry about it. And you can start trying it out with the quick start images right after the town hall. So I'm super excited about this one. All right, next is DBT. So DBT, as you very well know, is an amazing piece of technology. Lots of people are using it. And it's got this interesting thing about metadata. So DBT allows you to add metadata to your models, to your views, to your tables. And the way you do that is by just adding a little meta section in your model definition. So, people have invented their own ways of creating metadata and attaching that to their DBT models. For example, there's one company in the community that does something like this. They have a meta section, and in there they put the business owner, the team owner, data classification, data lifecycle, et cetera, et cetera. And what we are rolling out is the ability for you to map these meta elements into DataHub concepts. So for example, you can go into your DBT source config and add this additional meta mapping section, and you can essentially provide matching rules to the properties in the DBT meta section. Obviously, the DBT meta section is kind of free form, so you have to provide matching rules like, hey, data governance business owner, match on everything and do an add owner on it. Data governance team owner, do the same thing, but the owner type has to be a group. You can add terms like glossary terms. So you can say things like, if data governance.data classification is public, then add this term, classification.public, et cetera, et cetera. So you can kind of add tags, add terms, add owners, and kind of map the base meta elements into modeled elements on the DataHub side. Again, I'm very excited about this. It has been actually a very common request from both the open source community as well as Acryl's customers. So I'm really excited to get it out for everyone. And this is what it looks like once you actually set this up. You will essentially get these particular elements mapped into like your tags, your glossary terms, as well as ownership. So this means you don't have to keep looking into the property bag to figure out what's going on with your DBT meta. And you can kind of have a nice mapping system between your DBT meta, language, or vocabulary into the DataHub space. Coming in 8:20. All right, next thing, we'll get our noob Aditya to talk about what he's been working on for data freshness indicator and give a quick sneak preview of what's coming in the next release.
Hey everyone, I'm Aditya, nice to meet you. Shirshanka talked about one thing that we're excited about is adding an indicator on the UI of how fresh a data is. So, as you can see from the screenshot, you can check when a data set was last updated. We actually want to make this a time series in the future so that at different points in time, you can tell when a data set was updated, and eventually, probably at the beginning of January, we're hoping to include other metadata about when those changes were issued, as well as who issued them, what kind of type of change was it, how many rows were affected, that sort of thing. The initial support is just going to be for the data warehouse sources, so BigQuery, Redshift, and Snowflake, but we're hoping to extend this more broadly in the future. Cool. Back to Maggie, I think.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Welcome to the team, Aditya. We're very happy to have you here. So one of the things I really love to do at the end of every year is to pause and actually reflect on how far we've come. It's really easy to get caught in the grind of just crank it more and more and more features out, and you kind of forget how far we've come from there. So put together a little year in review. Let me get this up and running. And let's take a minute to reflect and celebrate. All right, so let's take a look at DataHub 2021 in review. So in this year, we've had 97 total people contribute to the open source project. That ranged over 1,300, almost 1,400 commits, with nearly 1 million lines added and 500,000 lines deleted. I personally always love the deletions. Those feel really good when you go through them. And one thing I really love about looking at this kind of timeline of contributions is that we see really steady contribution rates throughout the year, but also a steady increase in the number of contributors. So I'm just super excited that we have such a thriving and lively group, and that we're rocking and rolling super steady. So digging into the contributors a little bit more. Acryl data, for those of you who aren't aware, Acryl data actually was started January 1st of 2021. So this is the first year of Acryl. And so we see a lot of the kind of core contributions coming from the Acryl team as maintainers, but also a fantastic set of humans that are contributing as well. So huge shout out to these folks. One thing I will call, so we have, on the right side is kind of the open source contributions. One thing I will call out here is, so Truffles is Tamash, then we have Pedro and Asim. And as of December 7th, I think, all three of those folks are officially on the Acryl team. So not only are they contributing to the open source project, but we're also just sourcing some really talented developers to keep this moving forward. So along with Aditya, we're just super thrilled to have three amazing engineers joining the Acryl team, and just huge, huge, huge excitement there. So looking at some of what we built in 2021, and this is truly only some of what we built. Keep that in mind. Q1 was a full rewrite of the front end. So the initial application was in Ember, not a really widely adopted language. So we rewrote it in React to make it easier for people to contribute to. You'll see on the right side here, these are some of the kind of initial screens that we had. So the landing page was just this kind of like browse, search, very basic. Our dataset page is very kind of like tabular. The lineage page was just kind of this like node to node with no real additional information there. So keep those in mind as we go through and see some of the other features as a point of reference. From the developer experience side, we also rolled out a Python-based ingestion framework, which is, again, just making it easier for people to contribute to the code. Integration support, I won't call out all of these, but just like within the first few months of the year, we're already supporting a ton of the core kind of like modern data tool sets, or tool tech stack sets. I don't know what you know what I'm saying. All right, moving along to Q2. This is where we start to see a lot of really great improvements to our UI, UX. So we have a brand new lineage visualization. So we're not looking little node to node. We now have like a rich experience here. We also started, based off of community feedback, started enhancing how much you could actually interact or manage from the UI. So added in editable field descriptions, data set descriptions, and then also giving kind of an observability metric of popularity scores. So a point of reference of how relevant is this data set within my organization. We also rolled out YAML-based glossary terms on the kind of backend side, or the dev experience side of things. And that was like a big step for us in having kind of like a managed data governance offering and a code-based data governance offering. And again, in the realm of making it easier for developers to interact here, we introduced no-code metadata and also a simplified deployment to minimize that tech stack footprint. This is also a huge month for the BI realm of things, or kind of the analytics engineering integration support. So looking at DBT, Superset, Looker, all three of those are just huge within that stack. And we've made a ton of really great progress from there. Rolling into Q3, this is where we started to see some UI redesign, so refreshing the look and feel of our pages. Also rolling out dataset profiling. So for a given table, how many rows were populated on a day-over-day basis, or on a columnar level? What was the distribution of those values? So helping data practitioners really understand the shape of those data sets. From the developer experience standpoint, rolling out our GraphQL, and then also user and group provisioning and role-based access. So really starting to build out these core components of data governance. And then on the integration side, this is when we rolled out Feast and SageMaker. So now starting to support machine learning, right? So we're taking a lot of steps really rapidly. And then last but not least, we get to Q4. This is on the UI and UX side of things, was really focused on helping users get into DataHub and make the most of the metadata quickly and not having to do too much kind of digging around. So we overhauled our search experience, rolled out landing page recommendations to really just surface the metadata that matters most. And then on the backend side, again, in the theme of making it easier for developers, rolling out our no-code UI, automatic dataset lineage extraction, and our stateful ingestion and stale metadata. Last but not least, on the integration side, we now support M1, so kind of navigated that surprise, and then continuing to roll out additional support with Mode and NiFi and all these other great integrations that folks are looking for. So, like I said, this is only a subset of what we did, but I would like to think that we came a very far way in a very short amount of time. And I just really want to congratulate and thank all of you guys. Thank you. Woo-hoo! It was a lot of fun to put this together. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot to cover. All right. So now that we've celebrated, let's do some learning. How does that sound? So
sounds great. Maggie,
great.
There's just one person we forgot to welcome.
Who?
Ryan.
Ryan, I'm so sorry. Oh, Ryan, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
Things are moving very fast.
Very new, so.
The team is growing so rapidly. I'm so sorry, but welcome, Ryan. We're likewise very happy to have you here.
And also, if I may add, superstar hire from the community is
Maggie
Shirshanka.
Maggie Hayes.
Yes.
So the community has been just amazing. It's so great to see people actually diving in and moving mountains. And obviously we want to move mountains with you. And sometimes the interests align and then we can move mountains together. So if that's not a hint, I don't know what else is. But, we're so lucky to have this amazing community of data practitioners and developers working with us. Back to you, Maggie.
All right. Pedro, do you want to drive or you want me to share?
If you wouldn't mind, please share. It's probably easier. And before we even get into the presentation, thank you, Maggie, for the shout out, and to the entire Acryl data for giving me this chance. Truly, it is a dream come true, and this is a dream team in more ways than one. So with that said, back to basics. So the idea of this presentation here is to explain a little bit how users and groups from a metadata entity perspective relate to when you as a user try to log into DataHub through an authentication process. Okay, so with that in mind, assuming that this is working, let me try. No, it was so good yesterday. Oh, wait, here we go. There's a lag here. Sorry about this. So how do they relate? There are essentially 3 steps here, and I've color coded them so that you can relate them afterwards if needed. So an initial step is how you ingest user and group information into DataHub from a metadata graph perspective. So how you can have the notion of users correlate to other entities that you might have in your deployment. A second step that we'll define in yellow is authentication. So how can you actually log in to DataHub? How can you access the UI using credentials so that not everyone can access your particular DataHub instance, and to also identify who you are as a person within DataHub. And finally, the magic sauce here is how you can actually relate and match the user that has just been authenticated to existing users in the metadata graph. So with that in mind, let's first look into users and groups. These are part of the metadata model, and there are 2 instances. One is a corporate user, which essentially models who a person is and what they are doing in relation to other aspects or other entities, I should say, in DataHub. So you're just modeling a person. And you want to do this to answer questions like, who is the owner of X? Who has worked on Y, right? So an example here could be who is the owner of X dataset. In this case, it would be John, but it could very well be Mary or Jane or someone else. And you want to have this sort of information in DataHub. The other notion is the notion of a corporate group. So this is essentially you're modeling a group of people within DataHub, right? So perhaps you do not have a single owner or a single person responsible for some asset. You have a set of people, and you need to define this in some way. And you're essentially saying, okay, if there is a operations team that is handling the production databases, they are composed of more than one person. You model this as a corporate group, right? It matches very closely to what you would ingest or what you would see, for example, from an LDAP group. And that's what we're trying to do here. If you want to, when you try to ingest these users, or if you want to update them or even delete them, usually the way that this should be done is by using the metadata ingestion framework against data sources like LDAP or IDP, so the identity providers. This depends on your setup, but we support things like Okta and Azure Active Directory, right? There is, however, an extra way of doing this, which is very specific if you're using SSO, which is the first time, if you have DataHub enabled with SSO, the first time that you log in, depending on the configuration, you will be created, or your credentials will be used to create a corporate user within DataHub, even though there may or may not be any relationship to others in the first time. But this is dependent on configuration for this very particular setup. So again, this only happens at the first login, which means that updates do not happen. Or you update it directly in the UI. Though bear in mind here, it's probably best if you do all your changes at the identity provider level, just so you have a single source of truth and there's no mismatch of information, if that might happen. So just a tip on that particular scenario. Also, important notes here. Users and groups only represent people and accounts that have relationships to other datasets, or may have, not currently, but perhaps in the future. It is only used at that level for the entity graph. This is not used for authentication or authorization at all. And that's because DataHub does not have a database or a service to manage users and credentials. What we do is we defer to external services, right? So this is your single sign-on, you're connecting to an external service, or you perhaps have LDAP or JAS with some users and passwords in a file somewhere. So moving on from that, step 2 in this process is authentication. So DataHub currently supports 2 ways of logging in and being authenticated, which are JAS, so your typical user password combination, and that you can integrate directly with LDAP, or alternatively SSO. So again, accessing an identity provider to get user information and have that to identify this entity that has connected to DataHub and is doing searches or is running metadata ingestion. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this is for OpenConnect, OpenID Connect SSO, not other methods. That's the only one that we support. Thank you, John, for that. And this authentication step serves only to limit and identify who gains access to the UI or to the DataHub components, but it does not affect the metadata graph of information, okay? So there are 2 separate and very distinct notions here. One is related to the graph itself, of things that we store and relate in DataHub. The other is how you gain access to these services. So where does the magic happen and how does it happen? When a user becomes authenticated, we try to translate that into a corporate user entity in DataHub. We do this by extracting information from JAS or the OIDC connection, where once we validate the credentials, we map them, and it depends on what you're using. For the JAS use case, we take the username that you used and prefix that with earn li corporate user, and that's the earn of the user that has just authenticated. For OIDC or SSO, it depends on the claim variable that you have configured for DataHub to extract information. So in this case, you would do earn li corporate user and the extracted information. So a simple use case could be that you defined an email as the claim, right? So in my case, let's say it's Pedro at acryl.io. That entire string would be used as the suffix for my earn. But perhaps the only thing that I want to do is to have just Pedro, right? I don't want the at acryl.io. So in that case, for claims, I can actually customize the way that I extract that information from the regex. And that is using environment variables, so auth OIDC username regex. And here is the example for that I've just given you. That's how it would work. But bear in mind, and this is a source of a lot of confusion, or a significant amount of confusion that I've seen in the community, is that these earns that we compute when you log in, they must match exactly to the earns of existing corporate users so that you have that match. That's how that's done. It's essentially a lookup that we do on the metadata graph, right? Now, once you've done this, once you've matched it, if you've configured SSO, or by default SSO does this, is automatic metadata provisioning. So I mentioned before that you could do the ingestion via the framework, but you can also do this on the fly when you log in, which is enabled by default, which we will try to provision user and group profiles when users first log in. And this can be something that you might not want, for example, for governance use cases, to only allow access to DataHub, to its UI and to its backend for people who have been previously ingested in the past. And these are the environment variables that you need to look at. Why is this important? Perhaps you just want, for instance, at first for the data team to access DataHub, even though you've enabled SSO. And everyone in your company can use SSO, right? But perhaps you just want a subset of those users to access DataHub for, let's say, perhaps confidentiality purposes. So this is how you can control that sort of thing in an SSO scenario. So just a shout out to that. To generate corporate groups from this first login scenario, you look at the groups claim, and we expect an array of information to be given there, and then generate users based on that. So an example could be, I belong to the engineering, to the data groups. So if they do not exist, DataHub will automatically create these groups for us, right? To give you a sense of what this looks like end to end. And remember, this is only for SSO. So you log in, given that information that the identity provider gives, we extract the email, first name and last name. We create a corporate user from that. And if it does not exist, we add it to the database. And then as a second step, we try to extract the groups. If they exist and are well-formed, we create a corporate group object. Again, we add it if it does not exist. And then the final step is to create a group membership aspect in this created group user to connect to the other groups that we have. So this is how ingestion at a first step, or the first ingestion with SSO happens. However, bear in mind that the reason why I'm actually giving this presentation is perhaps because we found it to be a little bit confusing. I'll admit I myself was quite confused even when trying to do this presentation, and still am. Sometimes I need to think a little bit to understand how things work. So I completely understand if other people in the community also feel the same. And I want you to know that there is an ongoing conversation of whether this is the right way to go, or if we should do this kind of relationship between metadata and authentication differently. If that's the case, then please, any thoughts that you might have, any opinions, come talk to us, because this is something that can clearly be an issue for people who are onboarding on the first time. And Maggie, that's it on my side. Thank you all for listening to me. And I hope this clarifies a very little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Pedro. All right, let's go over to Mr. John for UI-based ingestion.
Hey. All right, cool. Hey, do you mind if I share screen here?
Let's go.
All right. So first of all, thank you, Pedro. That was super useful. I think that was a great overview of how to get onboarded to use this groups for the first time. like Pedro mentioned, this is a very important part of the onboarding experience, and it's something we are actively working to improve. So I just want to reiterate that feedback is very appreciated. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about a feature we've been working on in the past month. It's called UI-based ingestion, and I'm just going to get right into it. First, with a recap of the current state of the metadata ingestion framework. So to ingest batch metadata into DataHub, most of you are probably aware, it's kind of a 3-step process. The first step is you install the DataHub CLI from PyPy. Second step is you define a YAML source recipe where you say which source you want to pull from and the configurations about that source, how to connect to it, which tables, which databases to pull out of it. And then finally, you run this DataHub ingest command in the CLI. So on the right side here, you can see kind of that process in a picture. We have the config, and then we run that DataHub ingest command. And this is all well and great. It actually has a lot of good things about it and some not as good things. So I'm just going to talk about what we view as the pros and the cons of the current metadata ingestion framework, and batch metadata ingestion in particular. It's simple. We've tried to design the framework in a way that has clean abstractions, clear separation of concerns. It's easy to extend. You can add new systems pretty easily on your own. You can add custom systems to pull from. It's scalable, right? So by virtue of having sort of distributed producers of metadata, you can actually scale across environments. And this is particularly useful in really complex cloud setups that a lot of companies have today, or even in cases where larger companies have subsidiaries and they actually want to push metadata from multiple disparate places as opposed to having one centralized source. Now we'll talk about the downsides of how we're doing this today. So the major one is really just accessibility. The framework is really intended to be consumed by a technical audience, right? Developers, sysadmins, people who are kind of comfortable going into the command line, but also operability, right? So once you've run that DataHub ingest command for the first time, it's great. You have metadata in DataHub, but it's not always clear how you actually productionize that, right? And kind of like schedule that on a recurring cadence, which is what you're going to most likely want to do. And so typically people end up using a third-party scheduler, something like Airflow or Prefect. So what we've done in the last month is really just take a deeper look at the cons here in order to see if we can kind of help address them in any ways. And I think we came up with a couple of goals here, and that is to increase the accessibility, obviously, and reduce the operational overhead associated with operating the current metadata ingestion framework. And the approach we took was kind of twofold. We wanted to simplify ingestion such that users didn't need to code to ingest, and ingestion should take less than 5 minutes after you've set up DataHub. So pretty much quick start, ingest some data within 5 minutes. But we also wanted to keep the good things about the metadata ingestion framework that I called out. Continue to build on top of that as a basic building block, as opposed to reinventing something completely new. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. So what we came up with is a way to do UI-based metadata ingestion. And specifically, I'll talk through the feature set that we had in mind when we were first brainstorming this. And that was a recipe builder in the UI, a way to configure ingestion using a pre-built template, or write your own custom recipe in the UI. On-demand execution, being able to run your recipes in a single click once you've actually defined them. Cron scheduling, so a way to actually schedule your recipe to be run on a continuous cadence, kind of addressing that productionalization or authorization issue. A secret store, a way to create, store, and embed encrypted secrets that are injected at ingestion time in DataHub itself. And real-time monitoring, so a way to actually monitor your pipelines as they run in real time. And so now I'm going to take a step back and do a quick demo of what we came up with in the last month. This was all, I'm going to disclaimer, this was working this morning. So really hoping it's going to work here. So we have a fresh instance of DataHub. This is what you'd find if you ran quick start and went to localhost 9002. In this case, I have a local instance going. You're going to see immediately that we have a new tab up here called Ingestion. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And right now we don't have anything, it's pretty bare, but I'm going to walk through the process of setting up UI-based ingestion through this portal here. And I'm going to start by clicking create new source. And what you'll see is, we've got a bunch of these pre-built templates for different sources that are supported by DataHub. And what I'm going to try to do is actually connect to the DataHub MySQL instance itself. It's kind of meta. We're doing like a recursive thing here, but let's see how it goes. So I'm going to click on MySQL. And what you're going to see here is actually, an in-app recipe builder. And so I can actually come up here and click this and try to expand it a little bit. That has sort of all of the configurations for the MySQL source already filled in. And if I have any questions about these, I can just, of course, go here and check out the MySQL source docs, see what the configs that are available are. But I'm pretty familiar with it, so I'm just going to go ahead and start filling it out. I'm going to be connecting to the DataHub database, and my username and password is finally just DataHub. And then finally, I'm just going to point this at GMS directly to go right there. All right, so the next step is, now that I've defined my recipe, actually scheduling that on a particular cadence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to schedule it for 2 minutes from now. So I'm going to say 46. This is a cron scheduler, of course. And I'm going to say every day. And what you're going to see is this is going to run at 9:46 a.m. And I want it to run in America, Los Angeles time, because that's where I live. Of course, you can use UTC, something else. And then I'm just going to give it a name. I'm going to say MySQL source 1. Hit done. And now we have a new ingestion source. And so if you hover over here, it'll show you, it runs at 9:46. But you'll also notice that I have the ability to just go ahead and execute it. So I'm going to go over here and actually execute the source with the new recipe that I've just defined. And what you'll see is the source starts running. So I can click this to actually see all of the executions of this source. And I can see that it's running. So we'll just give it a couple seconds here to see if it finishes. Okay. So what I have over here is a window. Let's see. Okay, great. So I can see that, after 44 seconds, the pipeline ran. I can click it and actually see some ingestion output. I can see that we connected to MySQL. We were able to run it, and we extracted a bunch of information. So now if I go back home, the expectation is that I'll have some data. Yep. All right, okay, maybe the indices haven't been fully updated yet, but let's go ahead and try to get in here. Yep, so I've got my MySQL database loaded in, which is great. So actually, if we come back here, you're gonna notice that it's actually running again, and that's because it's hit that scheduled 9:46 run. So you can see there's 2 source ways to execute. You can manually execute it, you can execute it on the schedule. If I refresh it, yep, so that also succeeded. You can go ahead and check that out as well. Now I'm just going to show you quickly what it looks like to define secrets. So that's one of the other bullet points I wanted to call out there. It's not the case that you really want to put your sensitive information into this file directly in many cases, because this file itself, it isn't necessarily encrypted. And so what we've come up with is a system within DataHub to define secrets. And so what I'm going to do is come to the secrets tab. I'm going to click create new secret. And this is a place where I can create a named value that will be encrypted by DataHub and then resolved at ingestion time. So I'm going to create one called MySQL username. I'm going to call it DataHub, and then my username. Create it. It'll take a second here to refresh. Let's make sure that's created. And then I'm going to create one called MySQL password. Same exact thing. Just will skip the description on this one. Okay, so I've got 2 new secrets. I'm going to go back into here. I'm just going to edit this source, and I'm going to actually use that secret inside of my recipe. And so how you can do that is just the typical environment variable substitution. So I'm going to say MySQL username, MySQL password, and then hopefully this just works. Next, done. All right, cool. Now we're going to execute it once more. Let's make sure this works this time. And then once this is done, I'll show you one last thing, which is kind of what things look like when execution fails. So there's many cases in which execution can fail. You misconfigure a recipe or your secrets aren't properly defined. So there you go, it succeeded. We did resolve those secrets and we were able to extract the metadata. I can actually show you the failure case by just maybe changing this to, localhost, a different port, which isn't actually active, and trying to run it one more time. This one maybe will be a little bit quicker. One other thing I'll call out is that you can, of course, cancel running instances of the job as well. So I know some jobs can take a really long time or can get hung sometimes. So you can go ahead and cancel that using the cancel button there. And you can see that it's failed because we've failed to properly set it up. And if you go into it, you'll actually see probably some debugging information about why that source failed. And I think it'll eventually say that it can't connect to localhost, no connection. So this is really useful for us too, like as the central team. When you're running these recipes, it's going to be really easy for you to share your screen or send these to us for us to kind of take a deeper look about why things maybe aren't working for you. The final thing I'll show is just the cancel, which I talked about. Hopefully we get a run. Okay, so it's running. I'm just going to try to cancel and note that it won't remove any metadata that's already been ingested. And there you go. I went ahead and canceled that one. So that's pretty much the ingestion framework. You can actually see, in this case, with the cancellation, we got through some of the installation steps, but we didn't actually ingest anything. So you'll have a little bit of details in the case of the cancellation as well. But that's pretty much it, I think, for the demo. So I'll go back to the slides. All right. Just a quick overview and pictures for what we built for people who weren't able to make the session. And now, as usual, I'll talk a little bit about how this actually works behind the scenes for the technical audience who is interested. So how this works is we have a few new critical components that we introduced, along with, of course, the UI screens that you saw. We have, first of all, an embedded scheduler that we added into the metadata service that is simply responsible for listening to changes in your ingestion source schedules, and then actually scheduling them locally on a local thread using a cron scheduler. And what this is doing is just running and executing ingestion requests on a schedule. This means that if you take down the metadata service, when it comes back up, if you've missed a scheduled ingestion, it'll simply ignore it and pick up where the schedule left off. So I think that's a pretty important piece there. The other big piece that we've introduced is what we're calling the actions framework. And the actions framework is basically a subsystem that listens to changes in the metadata graph and then takes particular actions. So in the case of this, we actually built one action on top of the action frameworks, which is listening for requests to execute an ingestion source. And what it's doing is, in turn, using an executor, which we call, it's like an agent, an executor, to actually handle that command. So to kind of validate, run the actual DataHub ingest recipe. So we're really excited about this. And the actions framework is going to be much broader than just ingestion. We're envisioning it to be a place where we can define actions on tag changes, term changes, schema changes, and the like. And just a components overview, again, is we have this ingestion scheduler, an embedded cron scheduler inside of DataHub metadata service. This is an important point because it means that we don't have to integrate with something like Airflow or Prefect or something else as an add-on to DataHub. This is a native capability. We have an actions framework, which I mentioned responds to changes in the metadata graph. We have an ingestion action, which just actually runs the ingestion. And then we have the executor, which is actually the worker, basically. And finally, I'll wrap up by talking about the vision for the future on this set of features in particular. We would love to actually clean up some of the configs that you saw us having to define in the recipe builder. Specifically, the sync configurations aren't really that useful because we already know where your DataHub instance lives. So we want to make that a little bit easier. We'd actually, in addition to that, like to put a form or a more friendly UI on top of the recipe builder experience with the ability to switch back and forth between the normal YAML-based editor and a more user-friendly form. We'd like to add the ability to test your connection to a data source directly inside of the recipe builder so that you can get that quick feedback without having to go and click execute and see that something's wrong. We'd like to actually have in-flow secret creation. So as you're building that recipe, being able to just create a secret and embed that secret right inside that flow. And then finally, based on the demand from the community, we would love to introduce some sort of controls for rolling back ingestion runs into the UI, with the obvious upsides of that in the case of bad ingestions. All right. And yeah, I just want to make one last call to action. Help the core team prioritize these features. You can help us by reaching out to us on Slack, letting us know what you like, what you don't like about it, and most useful of all, just trying it out when it's released, trying to build some flows on top of it, and really battle testing the feature. All right, this is coming soon. We're targeting V1 rollout, which is everything you just saw, in January 2022 by the end of the month. So really excited to get this out to the community and start getting some feedback. And I think that's it for me, Maggie.
All right, thank you, John. So just a quick time check. We are running a bit long today. That being said, we're going to move forward with our agenda and have the team from Grofers present. And I hope you can all stick around, but obviously understand if you have a hard stop, and just know that we always end up posting these on YouTube as well. So I will pass it over to the Grofers team.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, I will try to make it quick as well. So Satyam couldn't join. It's me only today. Let me share my screen. Just let me know when you are able to see my screen.
You can see your screen.
Okay, cool. So hello everyone, my name is Shubham Gupta and I am an SD in the data platforms team at Grofers. So agenda for today is we will be seeing what's the Grofers data governance model and how we have integrated DataHub with our existing tools that are present already at Grofers, and how at what stage are we there in the data governance model that we see for future. Okay, a little bit about Grofers. So Grofers is a startup based out of India. It is one of the largest e-commerce platform focusing on the quick commerce side. We are operational in nearly 30 cities, working with over 5,000 vendors and grossing nearly 1 million orders weekly. So just begin. Sorry, yeah. So the Grofers data governance model basically is comprised of 4 major parts. First one is the source classification repository. So the idea of the source classification repository is basically to capture the data at its very source and start classifying it there only, instead of capturing it at different stages. So basically all the source data, be it like the application data, streaming data, log data, any kind of data that we need to that we need to analyze at Grofers need to be captured in the source classification repository. So this is basically a GitHub repository. A PR needs to be raised for every data set that needs to be entered, and proper classification tags need to be provided for that, whether the data is PII or not, or all the table description and column descriptions. So this is how we just collect the source data at one place. The second part is the data catalog, for which for us it is DataHub. This is meant to be the single source of truth for all data at Grofers. So basically, this contains all the source tables and if any other operation is being performed on the source tables, metadata about that as well has to be synced to the data catalog only. So also, but one thing we do is any data set that is being ingested to the source classification repository, we basically sync its metadata to our data catalog as well. That is DataHub for Jenkins job. And the third part would be the ingestion frameworks that basically helps us ingest the metadata from different components to DataHub its basic aim is to just connect to different components and extract metadata from there. And also one thing we target here is that the classification and the tagging that we have done at the source should propagate as well. Like we should not be classifying and tagging the data again and again. In case it's a replication job, the classification simply should propagate. Okay, so these three components basically makes up for our data catalog. It gets all the metadata ingested in our catalog. And then there are fourth components, the centralized governance. So how DataHub helps us here is it provides us with tagging capabilities and APIs. So using that, we can fetch those tags using DataHub APIs and drive governance using that over different data sources. And this governance can be different for different data sources as well. For example, for source databases, it could be as simple as just a DAG running at a scheduled interval and just revoking the permissions for those specific datasets for the users. And for data lake, we aim to use Apache Ranger along with our Presto engine to fetch metadata from DataHub and just drive governance over the data lake. So yeah, that was our data governance model and how data fits into it. Now talking about the integrations with existing tools. So once we had DataHub up and running up at Grofers, first challenge for us was ingesting the metadata into it. Since we were very early adopters, the ingestion frameworks were not that good at that time. So basically we just built a simple ingestion framework at that time, and which basically just took the metadata and emitted to the Kafka topic in the required format that is required by the data. And we just integrated this ingestion framework with our basic ETL libraries. And these ETL libraries were being already used at Grofers to power basic ETLs, like the ad hoc ETLs on JHub, and the same ad hoc ETLs when they're scheduled on Airflow, we start getting properties like the refresh frequency of the datasets as well. And other properties we are already getting from the ad hoc ETLs. So as I said, the ingestion, this is the ingestion framework part. So it needs to be integrated with other components as well. But since we are working on some short bandwidth on this project, so we are not able to integrate it with all the tools right now. So for that, we do some hacky kind of solutions. For example, for our source application pipeline, that is just making the source data available in Lake. What we do is we run a DAG at every 10 minutes that just captures all the metadata from our source application pipeline components and just dumps it into the data catalog in a read, modify, and write way. So that's basically how the metadata gets ingested at Grofers. Just a basic library, just a basic code example of how it is done. Users are already providing other arguments while building data sets. Now they started providing description as well, table description, docs if they like to, and we were picking the ownership and the refresh time from the runtime environments itself. And this is how basically we started ingesting data into a data catalog. So yeah, this ingestion worked well for us. We have now over 3,000 datasets in our DataHub cluster, and DataHub has become the de facto to go and search for table details for everyone. Now we have nearly 40 weekly active users, so that's great for us as well. And also for other forms of data discovery at Grofers is fetching these details via APIs as well. So once people started getting these details actually now in an automated way, they wanted to integrate the APIs in the ETLs as well, so that the ETLs can be sure that they are running with the correct data with the sanity checks as well. So yeah, people are using that in APIs, but the major use case and the most used feature with DataHub is our basic integration that we built at Grofers with Redash. So basically Redash is the primary BI tool that is being used at Grofers. So we wanted to reduce a hop between we basically wanted to reduce the hop between how people are interacting with data and how they see the catalog. So usually what happens is they come to Redash, they wanted to query data. They can see the schema browser in the left hand side, but they were not able to see the catalog here. They always needed to go and see there. So what we did was we basically used DataHub APIs and started showing the table details icon for the tables that have catalog available for them. So like the demo table that I just showed. So yeah, like this is a Presto Lake. So the user can just click this icon and just can get the basic details on the Redash itself. So this reduces a hop for them, and data discovery becomes more easy for them. They can get the basic details here. Properties are dynamic. They are being fetched from DataHub. Docs are there. And if in case they want to see more details, they can just click the view catalog button and go to the data catalog itself. It redirects them to the page itself. So yeah, that is pretty much it. I think I finished in time. Yeah, this is where we are right now. I know a lot of governance is not being governed using this, but ingestion and data discovery were our first goals because we were working with limited bandwidth. But our next goal would be that only, using these APIs and tagging capabilities to drive governance as well. And thanks to that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. We are we're about to wrap up. We have two surprises for you. So let me get this up and running. All right. So earlier this month, yep, it was this month, I sent out a request to the community to better understand like who's a part of the community, what industries are we in, what's our tech stack. And so we got some really great feedback there. I'll be publishing some of the high level outcomes of that shortly. And as a token of appreciation, we picked 5 winners to win some DataHub swag. And we are also going to be sending out swag to our top GitHub contributors for this year and our top Slack community members. We have, I'll be reaching out to you guys independently, but really just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's really just helping this community truly thrive. Last but not least, we have a little surprise. So Shirshanka and I interviewed some very important people in our lives, and we'd like to share what they had to say to us.
DataHub, from what I can tell, is a software tool that you are offering to other companies to help them gather all kinds of data from their companies and then make sense of it using your software. It could be a bank, it could be a food store, it could be a clothing designer, it could be anybody who's busy gathering data and then they don't know what to do with it.
So DataHub, I think it's some sort of platform that helps organize data, which is the main goal of the company. And I think it's like open to everyone to like store files of data into different folders.
Metadata, I'm making this up maybe kind of at this moment. I would guess that it means like huge, vast amounts of it, like a very large gathering up of data pieces.
So I have heard my dad talking about metadata in a lot of his meetings. And I think metadata is basically data that is meta. Like it's superhuman data. Like normal data can just store things, right? But metadata can store like more things and like more advanced things.
Pieces. I tell them that she is my tech savvy daughter and that she does things that I actually don't understand, but I can say a bunch of words that makes it sound like I do.
Well, so I normally tell them that he started a startup like half a year ago. And then they kind of ask like, oh, cool, what startup? And then I tell him the name, which is Acryl Data. And then they're like, what's it about? And so what my dad has told me is basically Acryl Data helps people organize their data with DataHub. Okay, that's a tricky question because we don't really like do many stuff with data and DataHub. But me and my friends play Minecraft a lot, and we love figuring out new things, like how to get an infinite source of something. And I think it would be cool to store all that info to different folders in DataHub, kind of categorize it, so if we ever need it again, we can just search for it in DataHub and we can just find that folder with perfect categorizing, and like we can just click on it and get what we want. Okay, so we're thinking about the future now. Well, I want the community to grow massively, and I also want DataHub as a whole, like the program itself, to get better. Like, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad or anything, but it would be awesome if it could get better, and by the community also helping, which would also increase numbers.
More people.
Yeah.
And more shared information, and about how they are finding help with actually using the tools. And that there's more, and I mean, I don't know how much back and forth talk there is now, but my hunch is that because they have you for the community manager, you would want them to be able to find ways to talk about and share things that are working, posing questions, and have it just be a very lively interaction, just back and forth. Well, yeah, this works, or this didn't work, or what's going on? Why can't I do it? And so just like more energy about sharing what you guys are being able to give them. That sounds
really
like
great.
a plan. Yeah. Oh, that would be fun to think about. Do you currently have one?
No.
What should your slogan be? Ask us. I could probably come up with something better.
It's okay, Mom.
A slogan. Okay, let me think. I think one could be like DataHub equals better data. Something like that.
All right, y'all.
All right, here you go.
So the fun part is that I hadn't seen my mom for 2 years. So we were doing that on Zoom a couple days ago. And now she's here with me.
Yay!
Yay!
I love this girl.
Happy
Welcome.
holidays, everybody. Happy
Happy
2021.
holidays.
Thank you.
2022.
2022.
Hey, team.
2021. Happy.
Wait.
It was good. Whatever. All right. Okay. See you all. Thank you.
And my son is too embarrassed to be on camera.
Oh, next time.
We did see him on a sneak peek.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody, so much. Have a great holidays, and talk to you soon.